By now, it's well known that opioids are addictive and potentially deadly. But why is that? John Williams, a senior scientist at Oregon Health and Science University, has been studying this issue for about 4 decades. When he started, no one knew that opioids affected neurons or nerve cells in the brain. Then he looked into what happens to the brain, discovering that opioids rewire the brain. So, we asked him about that. The interview has been edited for conciseness and clarity. Q. How do opioids work? Pain causes an increase in activity in some circuits in the brain, and opioids inhibit those circuits. They decrease the activity of neurons in the brain and periphery. They do that by acting on receptors, the sensors that are on the membrane of neurons. Once the opioid binds to that sensor, it causes an inhibition of activity. Brain cells rely on electrical activity to communicate between each other, and opioids decrease that electrical activity. Q. Why do they lose their effectiveness? A. That's a question that we've been working on for 30 years. We're discovering at least the super basics. Once an opioid binds to the sensor that we call receptors, the receptor becomes less sensitive over time. That has to do with the biochemical change in the receptor itself. Initial effects happen very rapidly, within 5 or 10 minutes. Then there's much more prolonged things that happen over days or weeks. Q. Anything else happen? A. The other thing that happens is that the body recovers from this inhibition. There's a change in other cells that don't have the opioid receptors that say, okay, everything is quiet here, we're going to increase our activity. There's a change in other circuits in the brain that increase their activity. Q. What other effect do they have on the brain? A. There are a lot of different circuits that are affected. The pain circuit is one. Opioids, also, inhibit respiration. The problem with that is the respiratory system doesn't adapt in the same way as the pain pathway system. It adapts very slowly. So there's not much tolerance. Q. Are there emotional effects? A. Opioids have very strong effect on emotional aspects of pain. People will say, yeah, I feel the pain but it doesn't bother me. That's the emotional side of the effects of opioids. A lot of that has to do with the reward system, the system that tells people that things are going well. Q. Then we have addiction? A. That's the big problem. Opioids have this big effect on the reward system, so people look more and more for this rewarding aspect of opioids. You become tolerant to that. People have to take more opioids to feel the same sort of pleasure they once felt. That results in respiratory depression. That's why we see so many deaths. Q. So, they rewire the brain? A. Yes, the junction between different cells, different neurons can become more or less effective with chronic treatment with opioids. Some connections are very much strengthened. Those might be the ones that are involved in the reward pathway. Other connections are weakened. Even cells that don't have the opioid receptors are affected because a neuron that has the opioid receptor has changed so much that there's an adaptive process in the non-opioid sensitive cells. Q.